Hey soldiers, let's talk about the emergency fund. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term emergency fund before, but did you know if you don't have one, you can be losing big financially in two different ways, two major ways. So today we're going to talk about the emergency fund and we're going to expand on that idea. In fact, we're going to be calling it an opportunity fund, and we're going to be answering the question of how much money should you have in an emergency/opportunity fund? Where should you keep it? And exactly what should it be used for? We're going to get into that and more. Let me get this hike in and we'll get started. All right, let's start out with how much you need in this emergency/opportunity account. Now, what you need to do is sit down and calculate your monthly expenses. Now, we're talking about the necessities here. We're not talking about the daily trip to Starbucks. We're not talking about Friday nights out with the fellas. All right, we're not talking about courtside at the Lakers. We're talking about those things where you might need to fall back and just worry about keeping the lights on, keeping the mortgage or rent paid. Things like that, all right? Now, you have to decide what your monthly expenses are. And then I typically want to see in my emergency account between 3 and 6 months worth of funding. And that will keep me liquid enough to address an issue should it come up. Now, should you be in a situation where you have to use this emergency fund, as in its entirety every month? I think the likelihood of that happening is very slim, okay? Especially when you look at possibly having to exhaust it. If you lose your job or your main source of income, hopefully, you've been watching this channel enough to know to have multiple streams of income. But if you lose your main source of income, most people are not just going to sit back and let an inordinate amount of time pass before they find another job. All right. So you want some liquidity to address that worst case scenario, keeping, all those bills paid. But I think it's more likely that what you'll see happen is 4 flat tires, busted water heater, issues you need to address a la carte, so to speak. And you don't want to have to resort to putting those expenses on a credit card and then letting that 30-day cycle expire and then realizing high expense credit, high interest rate credit. Basically, whatever you bought, the 4 new tires are now more expensive. So that's why you need to keep that liquidity. And that is why you need to sit down and calculate your specific monthly expenses. Again, for me and mine, 3 to 6 months is sufficient. There are people who were in certain fields, like years ago in America, they had folks working in the oil industry, extracting petrochemicals via the fracking process. This was big a few years ago, and then the policy changed and those people got laid off. Now, how long is it going to take you to find another job in that industry? Is that even possible? Might be a little different for someone who's in IT and gets laid off. I would imagine they are going to be able to find a job a lot quicker. So you have to put things into perspective with regard to that, to tell you how much funding you need. Also, when we talk about the opportunity fund aspect of this, if you are an investor, or if you are an entrepreneur, you want to look at this in terms of opportunity cost and not missing out on opportunities because you don't have the liquidity. Hot real estate deal comes up, okay? We've talked about how to get into those deals with no money down. I'll link to that later. But you want to be able to go ahead and pounce on something like that if you need to. That's where the opportunity piece comes in. So you, at the end of the day, need to take the monthly expenses as a starting point and then go from there to decide what does your situation dictate with regard to how long the duration of this account needs to last, just paying, the bills, and to what extent you include opportunity funding as well. All right, now let's talk about what you spend this money on. We touched on it a few moments ago. But look, again, this is not for the luxury aspect of your life. This is not for those, disposable expenses. Hey, there's a new pair of shoes. Let me spend my emergency funding on that. Absolutely not. This is not for that purpose. You want to look at those things, again, that are absolute necessities. Now, some people have an issue where they have to have childcare or their kids in a private school. That is going to be included in that figure as well. Any medical insurance that you might lose as a result of being unemployed, you would spend it covering those costs. Okay, so strictly on priority is emergencies, and then to the extent you padded it with some liquidity for opportunities, depending on what you may be doing entrepreneurially, then of course there would be some coverage for that as well. That's what you're spending this money on. True emergencies. All right. Now, the question becomes, where do you keep this money? A high yield savings account is where I would keep this money. Reason being that that's going to get you the highest return on your money out there. Your brick and mortar bank is not going to do it, all right? You're going to have to look at the panoply. There is a wide variety of online savings banks, i.e. high yield savings banks, that allow you to, look, it's mid-September 2023. They're up over 4%. I know that's not beating inflation, but that's really not what this is about. This account, although 4% is not going to beat inflation, what it will do, if you need to pull the trigger on this account, it will save you again from having to pay high interest credit card debts just by putting these emergency expenses on a credit card. Right now, we're looking at 24% interest rates on average, okay? So that's where you're going to win. Not necessarily, you're never going to get rich off of anybody's savings account. You're certainly not going to do that with a high yield savings account, but you are going to get a lot better return than you would at a brick and mortar bank. Now, the caution with a high yield savings account is what you have to remember is this. You can't walk into a branch and instantly withdraw your money. There's a process, usually takes a few days, okay, to transfer money from the high yield savings account into an institution where you can, get cash or pay by credit card. Now, some of these high yield savings accounts do have a card associated with them. So to the extent you need to address that issue, whatever it may be, if it's just one of these standalone a la carte issues, like, the AC went up, you can use that card. You got to do some research. We have done videos here on high yield savings account. Check this one out. Learn more about how that works. But that's what we are doing with regard to the emergency/opportunity fund. Now's the time. Set it up. Be prepared. Guys, I'll talk to you soon.